everyone. In this video I'm going to be talking about how the new hover mode system works. For anyone who doesn't know, this is a new traversal system that's been added in along with the 3.6 patch. Now I'm going to go over why it was implemented in the first place, what kinds of gameplay issues it's attempting to fix, and some of the edge cases that it's currently responsible for causing. Then I'm going to give some advice on how to get around it. I'm also going to be talking about how they can alter hover mode in the future iterations in order to fix those issues, and make it a more enjoyable experience while still accomplishing the goals that they're setting out to establish. First off, I'd like to state as a disclaimer that the team has already admitted that hover mode needs a lot of work at this point, and they're planning on making changes to help fix it. They're also more than likely going to have to iterate on it a number of times before it ends up getting to where they want it to be. I have no idea how long it's going to be before we see the first improvements to hover mode being added into the game, so for the time being I have some tips and tricks that can help you out until they do. So I'm going to just jump right into it. The best way to practice getting used to this mode is to use a Gladius, that is if you have access to one, and if not, try to see if you can borrow one from somebody else. I recommend using the Gladius for two reasons. First, the Gladius seems to be the one ship that's been best tuned to work with hover mode. And second, because it's the only ship that has an indicator built into the HUD that shows you exactly at what point hover mode is going to kick in. When approaching an LZ, I try to line up as best I can with my target location and get as close to the ground as I can before I start to slow down to the point where the ship switches over to hover mode. Once it does, slow down until you stop, and set the elevation ladder to 0. From there, hit F4 and adjust the third-person camera so that it faces directly overhead looking down at the landing zone below you. Now this is the real trick. If you tilt your nose down, the ship will start to move forward. The more you dip the nose, the faster you're going to go. If you raise the ship's nose up, you'll start to go backwards. Once again, the more you raise the nose, the faster the ship is going to speed off in reverse. The best thing to do isn't either of these things. Instead, use the strafe keys to move forward, back, left, and right while keeping the ship as level as possible. If you start to speed up too much in any direction, then use the opposite strafe key to slow down. Every now and again, make sure to go back into first-person mode to double check that the elevation ladder indicator is still set to 0. Once you've lined up with where you want to land, go into the third-person camera view mode and use the strafe keys to kill all your momentum. Once you've done that, strafe down until you've landed. After you touch down, the ship often has a tendency to keep sliding around the ground. If this happens, then hit I to disengage your engines. This will stop you from sliding. I wouldn't advise using space brake at all. It can be used to reorientate your ship back into a neutral position, but once you release it, it has a tendency to lurch your ship forward and force you to have to manually reposition the ship again and readjust the elevation ladder back to 0. Well, that's basically all there is to it. Just pick a landing zone and practice this over and over again until you feel comfortable with it. There is one other thing, and that's a lot of people are also having problems with taking off from vertical hangars. Which are the kind where the roof opens up and you have to ascend straight up to get out of them? This is easy to do once you know the trick. First, let the hangar doors open all the way before you attempt to take off. Don't engage the C button and instead strafe up until you've gotten out of the hangar. If you're still having problems with this, then just before taking off, press V, which will put the ship into decoupled mode. Now you should be able to strafe up without having to worry about drifting forward while you're ascending out of the hangar.
Please visit us again. Remember if you're contemplating.
Once you get high enough, press V again to get out of decoupled mode, and then press C to start moving horizontally. And there's one last thing to watch out for, and that's some ships at this time handle a lot worse than others while in hover mode, and some are nearly uncontrollable right now. A lot of people have asked why hover mode was even added into the game to begin with. The reasonings are twofold. First, it was meant to address the concerns that people had who felt that being able to float in midair while being in an atmosphere was unrealistic. And the other reason for adding it in was because, as it stands, ships could hover indefinitely in a strategically advantageous position above a ground unit, which allows them to be able to act like a mobile turret that has a superior level of firepower and shielding. These advantages will allow even a starter ship to be able to pick off any kind of ground target with ease. I generally felt that the no-fly zones and inclement weather was supposed to prevent ships from having total superiority over ground vehicles, but apparently CIG was looking for a more overall fix to this problem. It seems that in their attempts to give ground units more of a fighting chance, they ended up creating a whole new series of edge cases. First off, they made landing overly complicated, sloppy to handle, and easy for it to get out of control, especially for new players. This is because when you're in this mode, you can't dip your nose and see the surrounding area just below your ship while hovering. This is especially problematic for someone who likes to use the first-person cockpit view when flying. The designers are already taking steps to fix this, by adding in a holographic function that allows us to see the area below the ship from within the cockpit, which is an option that used to be in the game, but now needs to be updated so that it's compatible with their new render-to-texture tech. Second, hover mode kicks in automatically when you slow down to a certain speed. This could be a real problem if you're flying at that threshold between the two modes, and the ship can't decide if it wants to fly or hover. And once again, the designers are talking about turning hover mode into a toggle to prevent this from happening in the future. Another problem is that hover mode makes all ships act like a helicopter, which is its own unrealistic immersion breaker for me, especially if hover mode is supposed to promote realistic gameplay physics, since we already have Harrier ships in existence and they don't behave that way at all. I can see where the designers are going with hover mode, and I think that on a lot of levels it's actually a good idea. It's just that the implementation needs some work. Personally, I feel that a lot could be fixed by simply removing the helicopter physics from the whole equation. These physics feel especially redundant, seeing how you can already move by using the strafe keys while hovering. The main and retro thrusters should still be used to move forward and backwards, but most of their energy should be diverted to the maneuvering thrusters, which will be primarily focused on keeping the ship level, both horizontally and vertically. You should still be able to tilt the nose down or up without having to worry about the ship lunging forwards or backwards. But if you did tilt the nose up or down, it would put more of a strain on certain thrusters which would be handling double or triple the stress just to keep the ship stable. This would increase their wear and start to overheat them rather quickly if this position was held for too long. This would also allow me to do something that I loved doing before hover mode was implemented and can't do anymore. And that was to be able to turn the ship so that its engines were facing straight at the ground, with the ship's nose pointing straight up in the air. I'd then turn the speed limiter all the way up, and then hit C to take off like a rocket. So I still think hover mode can be salvaged without taking away our 6 degrees of freedom and allow the designers to achieve all the goals that they set out to accomplish by creating hover mode in the first place. I'm your host, Law of the West. Thanks for tuning in, and take care.